Good afternoon and welcome to Women Speaking. Welcome to today's conversation where we unpack the key takeaways from the State of the Nation Address 2025, as well as the growing debate surrounding the changes to the NGO laws. At the heart of this discussion are rising questions regarding Uganda's civic space accountability and the future of the civil society in the country. With mounting concerns from activists, legal experts, and development partners, we take a closer look at what these proposals mean, whom they'll affect, and what lies ahead for not just in the NGOs in Uganda, but the country as a whole. With me today to discuss this very pertinent discussion is a very illustrious panel whom I shall introduce. From my extreme left coming in. At my extreme left is Miss Yvonne Mpambara. Yvonne is a social justice warrior as well as a presidential aspirant 2025, congratulations by the way, and an equitable philanthropist. Yvonne, welcome. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is lovely to have you here. We are looking forward to your contribution to this discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And right next to her is Miss Naima Isa Sebi. Naima is a Pan-African Muslim feminist lawyer. I hope I got everything.
Definitely.
Good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, our viewers. I'm humbled to be back.
We're very excited to have you join this discussion, especially in regards to the NGO space.
I know.
Yes. And right next to Naima is a very familiar face, Miss Nancy Caroline Ayot. Nancy, who is here every week, is a feminist lawyer and a writer. Good afternoon and welcome again. I don't know if I should be welcoming you anymore. We should be welcoming the rest together.
Guys, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in this Tuesday afternoon. I look forward to this deliberation.
This is a very, very important discussion, not just the state of the nation, but the NGO. Civil society has reach across the entire country. It touches lives where the government cannot reach. More often than not, the civil society is the one that actually goes the extra mile in the legal space, the health space, in all matters across the country. So when we hear that there are proposed changes to the NGO laws, obviously multiple questions must arise. But before we delve into that, I would like to talk to us about the elephant in the room, the State of the Nation address. This year's address was particularly interesting in regards to the fact that, first, one of the things that stuck out to me was that certain media houses were not let in to air the State of the Nation address. That was particularly interesting to me. But before we delve into those particular nitty-gritties, Yvonne, why don't you give us a brief highlight of what unfolded?
Well, I think even before we delve deeply into what unfolded, I mean, a majority of us know every single year we followed this presidential State of the Nation. And of course, it's mandated by the Constitution to give an annual account of what has happened and what they are prioritizing for the next financial year. But if we are being honest as Ugandans, I don't know how much we're going to say that it has changed from all the years he has given addresses in terms of the achievements he's giving us. Of course, this year he has tried to, give us slightly a few numbers that seem like Uganda is pushing towards the right direction, but put a nail there, we shall come back to it. But I think majority of our anxiety is coming from the fact that now we're getting into transitional leadership and Uganda is working on eggshells. We do not know what's going to happen next. So I feel majority of what he gave us, there was one thing that he deliberately kept leaving out. Maybe it's in the larger report. I know the report is about 51, 52 pages, but we have one of our biggest questions is the democracy of this country. We've been working on eggshells because of M6. I don't say the full name because I don't know what's waiting outside. But we are working on eggshells because we don't know the kind of transitional government we're going to have after this. So much as we are talking about the general things that Museveni has given as a State of Nation address, the achievements he has given us, from what he gave us, honestly, he's been giving us things that have happened between 4 or 5 years ago. So he's just giving a progressive state of issues, right? If he's going to talk about health, education, etc., the statistics he's giving us, he has accumulated them. So it's not just an annual address, right? Which is what we're expecting. That was the expectation of the people, because we pay taxes annually, not so. So we're expecting that it's going to give us an annual recount of how Uganda has been performing and what the priorities for the next year are, but it's been giving us an accumulative, an account of achievements that have happened over the 3-4 past years, which I don't think is what he was supposed to be doing. But also, if you go back to what we were talking about, the fact that certain things were left out, definitely intentionally, because we're getting into an elective year, so he knows maybe certain things he will say are going to put him in the limelight for negative aspects of whatever he was willing to give Ugandans. So there's a lot to ask ourselves, you know. Is this from the address that we had, do we see the progress he's talking about? Is it there or it's not? But also the key questions of expectations of Ugandans. What did he address? What did he address? Can we say from the last presidential, from this address he has given us, that we can pinpoint and say this is what has changed, this is what has remained the same, and this is what we're going to achieve next year? Are these promises now working? Is there magic anymore, like they've been promising us for, I don't know, all these years since 1986? Again, he was referring to it in the last address. People, some of us were not even born yet. We do not know what was happening in 1986. We've known one government, right? So when he keeps giving us his address and he's comparing to other governments, you know, compared to what was happening in 1986, this is how well we are doing. We have no clue what you're talking about, because we were not there. We've only known one government that is meant to give us achievements of what we know now. I don't know how Amin was performing. A lot of people say, oh, he was addicted. I don't know. I wasn't there. So right now, why don't you show me the achievements of what has happened in my lifetime? What has happened last year? What has happened in this financial year? That you feel you can tell Ugandans for sure, there's improved health, there's improved education, there's improved democracy because of the following things. We put mechanisms in place where we know women are not going to be beaten during elections. We have not had any of that. So I don't want to go into the nitty-gritties of saying, you know, these are the exact things you were saying in the presidential address and the State of Nation address, because I feel it has been the same, to be honest with you. Maybe along the discussion, we're going to get into the nitty-gritties of certain aspects, but I think that's where we can start from.
Okay, then thank you for that, Yvonne. You mentioned something very interesting regarding the numbers. You said put a pin on that. Do you have any level of distrust, any questions in regards to the numbers raised?
I definitely do. He said Ugandans that we have improved in terms of the poverty aspect.
It has dropped from 20%
to 16%. I had that. And I wondered, honestly, where that number has come from. If even us in the working class, we are struggling with everyday life. Salaries have not increased. Have they increased?
No.
We are still taxed the 40% that government requires, right? Rent has gone high. The price of bread. Who can afford to buy bread now randomly and walk to the road and buy bread? On a small budget of 3, 4, 5K. Nobody. So you're telling me, I'm going to speak for myself as a working class person. You're saying that rate has dropped. But in what sense has it dropped if I can't sit here and account for? I can account for my liter of fuel because I know how much it hurts me to put in that 5,000 per liter into the car.
Yeah.
Right? I am living from salary, the little I'm getting, to paying your taxes, to the small bills and etc. I have to pay, back to a loan, money is done. That is a cycle. So when you're telling us the poverty line has dropped, what are you basing on? You have a struggling working class. You definitely have a poor, struggling class. They are not making ends meet. Hand to mouth, where is the 5,000 coming from anymore to feed yourself? The economy is very difficult. Even rich people are complaining. These rich people have been also hoarding resources like a problem. They also complain they don't have 100,000 to lend you. So I need to understand, because then if you're telling us that statistics have changed, where are you picking them from? Ask the people on ground can tell you it's the reality is different.
I want to pitch in real quick because the president actually quoted the census, which
just concluded,
the recently concluded census, which we all know
is filled with flaws,
which we all know was a wrong census. We can't rely on that type of information to talk about people in Uganda, to make policies on people in Uganda. I wanted to put it there because we're talking numbers.
And I also don't think I trust the numbers he's quoting, because what is the basis of these numbers? One, if you're using the UBOS, UBOS proved to us they have no capacity of really quoting the exact numbers as is in this country. So I think this is just a few people who sat on their desks and they started guessing. I think we should put this figure and put this figure for the president to address. This looks nice, this looks reasonable, we might convince the people about these figures. I don't think those figures reflect the reality of what is happening in this country. So yeah, here we are again. This is Uganda for you.
Naima, you said something very interesting. We might convince the people, which is a very interesting term. Do the people even care enough, not even just to appreciate the figures, to even watch the State of the Nation address, to even read the document that was released in the State of the Nation address? Do the people of Uganda still care?
Well, personally, the things I gave up on in this country, things like figures, numbers, information. Like you had said earlier, there's some media houses that were blocked from accessing or televising the State of the Nation address. So ask yourself, what happens to the people who watch the specific stations or media houses, or those who listen to those specific media houses?
Included.
I'll give you an example. My parents and I, and the community I live in, I know most of them listen to PAL FM. PAL FM, that's where the information, they would get the information from, because the majority are Muslims. And PAL FM was blocked from transmitting. They were suspended. So for those who listen to that particular station, that means they were cut out from accessing that information. NTV was blocked from accessing the State of Nation address. So what happens to the audience that watches NTV or related media houses that are related to the nation media? So I think where Ugandans are, they are tired. What we say locally, saying bakowu. People are bakowu. You get to the extent that, as even trying to read the State of Nation address, and to me it sounded generic. It sounded like it was a replica of what has been happening in the previous years. Like it's the same communication, same style of presenting it. The only thing they did is change and tweak a little bit of information here and there, you know, figures here and there, but it is the same. And like a previous speaker was saying, it does not really reflect the reality of this country. If you start talking about poverty rates dropping, I myself am struggling with fuel. My dear, fuel has become an issue in this country, and I'm equally a working class member, you know. And then what happens to the people who are farming to be able to afford basic needs in their lives? And the taxes that are being placed on these products that they're producing, they're being taken advantage of by the people who are selling in the markets, because people want to meet the demands of taxation in the market spaces. So that means poverty and inflation in this country is affecting us from the top to the bottom. And I saw somewhere it was quoted the inflation rate is 3%, which for me is a joke. It's a real joke. I can just tell, okay, let me just talk about fuel. 2 years back, fuel was not at the rate it is right now. As we speak today, fuel costs 5,000 a litre. Fuel back then, 2 years back, was 3,800 a litre.
Yeah.
So is that 3% inflation? No, it is more than 3% inflation. If we look at bread, and you see the impact the fuel has on every produce in this country, from what the tomatoes you buy, the onions, because we use cars to transport these things. So if the fuel rate is high, that means most of the products we are going to be able to access as citizens of this country that are basic to us, the prices are going to shoot. She talked about bread, but I'm looking at a lady in a farm who needs to like go buy matoke that has to be transported from Masaka. How much the inflation on fuel is going to affect the transportation costs to the market. I think they're like 3 fingers of bananas for 1,000. So you cannot tell me inflation is 3%. These figures do not speak to the reality of what is happening on ground. And at this rate, honestly, Ugandans are tired, and all they want to do is know how best they can survive so that they live to see another day and live to afford a meal, the next meal. For many of Ugandans do not even know what they're going to eat tomorrow. So I don't think they even had the time to even listen to the State of Nation address. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. Nancy,
Yes.
I'll bring you into the conversation right now. This is, some would say, this is obviously the last State of the Nation address the president is giving before the upcoming elections.
Before he becomes president again.
So you already know he's going to be president. We have an aspirant here. You would win. Demoralize her.
That is worthy competition. Let us not.
No. It's not a reflection of Yvonne's worthiness. It's a reflection of the state of our democracy.
Yeah, the state of our democracy.
Yeah.
Okay, so some would say that all in all, this State of the Nation address ought to reflect what the NRM government has done in their newest term. How do you believe?
I believe that when you say it like that.
How do you believe the performance has been over the last 4 years? If we are hinging on the State of the Nation address, you gave someone, there was a social contract you entered into with the NRM government. In 2021, as a citizen, you voted. Am I correct?
Yeah, I didn't vote like that, but I voted. Yes.
Yes. But in the end, majority of Ugandans entered into a social contract with the NRM government, and they were expected to deliver certain things on that basis. And so this State of the Nation address ought to tell us, and I think that was, I'm assuming that was part of the reason the president decided to highlight over the last 4 years their achievements, their reasoning, or their failings where it ought to have been. So based on this State of the Nation address, if we're looking at it as a gauge on performance, where are we standing? Where is the NRM government standing?
Well, you've given me that difficult question, but but let's get into it, all right? So for most of my life, for all of my life, really, while I followed issues of elections, presidential addresses, and all those things, we followed it from the living room on TV, and usually you flip channels. What is it? What is UBC saying? What is NBS saying? And usually it's the same thing, right? It's the same president speaking, and the whole nation presumably listening to him. But this time, to begin with, it was a Thursday, a work day.
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon. And be intentionally done so.
And just the eve of the public holiday. So I don't understand that type of scheduling, because there is no way I could have sat down and listened to that presidential address in real time. People are out there trying to make ends meet. If people sit down for those hours, I don't know how they made a living, or how their bosses took it. And for me, that was very problematic, because I was in the middle of a work day and I wanted to see this thing. But I had to listen to it later on YouTube, because, and not on NTV YouTube channels, because they didn't have it yet. And secondly, you also notice the procession that takes place before that type of address. People marching. We have dignitaries from other countries.
People do march.
Yes, they come in. The speaker comes in a procession, and the president comes in a procession.
Very
people
celebratory manner.
Yeah. They greet him. They shake hands, and some people clap a lot. And not that I have a problem with that. He's a fountain of honor. Yes, he needs the honor. However, for me, I feel like this type of procession is the problematic politics of personality that I've been talking about ever since. Because the Speaker of the Nation, who was the chair of this session, started by thanking the president
and praising
the president and the NRM. Said the NRM government. Mind you, let us also note that the opposition members in this government, but they said the NRM government, and so everything has been attributed to the NRM government, and so was the entire address. Just before 1986, the politics of war heroes played a big part in this State of the Nation address, just like in most State of the Nation addresses, because we are reminded about what happened in the bush. But I feel like every time they describe the situation before the bush, it is right where we are right now. That is my exact point. Pre-Bush war politics, or pre-Bush war Uganda, sounds exactly like this time, only with a bit more tech, like we've said before in this show, with a bit more tech, and younger people and everyone who has the opinion actually getting their telephone to record a video or something like that, of which there's freedom before speaking, but the freedom after speaking is not exactly guaranteed. So while I listened to the State of the Nation address, I wanted to hear new things, but of course the beginning rubbed me the wrong way, because it wasn't a national event, it was an NRM event, and for me that was largely problematic. Secondly, when we came to when the president started his speech, he started by talking about the parable, a parable from the Bible of fools who build their foundations on sand, and how the NRM built its solid foundations on rock.
I mean,
on
they're
solid
still
rock.
here.
Yeah. And
Let us debunk that.
let us debunk the fact that people are he bragged about the NRM's consolidation of power, and we all know how they've consolidated this power. He also endorsed the militarization of institutions and talked about how people complain about the army, but they've done a good thing. The army in fisheries, the army in agriculture, in healthcare. Yes. And he described the NRA, I'm talking about the NRA army, as Pan-African. You need to tell us. Okay, I'm also Pan-African, but because of all their missions in other countries, and for me, that we've already said that the NRA has become a group of mercenaries to other African countries.
Hired out to
go and hunt and kill and do all sorts of atrocities in other countries. So what I did have was a total gaslighting session, like a 3-hour gaslighting session of not understanding whether I live in the wrong part of the country. And I actually live in a fairly good neighborhood. When our matters came through, some of them were saying, this is different from some parts of Kampala. This is a bit
Matters.
Like we live in Chaluwajala. When the matters
the pilgrims.
The pilgrims. I mean, sorry. My bad.
You mattered them.
Sorry. Oh my God.
It's okay, we understand.
We understand.
The mindset right now is what?
Mattered.
So when the pilgrims came in, they were talking about how the land of matters is so good, that the neighborhoods are so clean, everyone lives in nice houses, and I tell you what, we are struggling.
That's what I was saying.
We are struggling to live in those neighborhoods. But also, it made me wonder whose reality was presented to the nation, because it wasn't the normal Ugandan's reality. It wasn't the middle class person's reality. It wasn't the rural person's reality. It wasn't even the fairly urban suburban woman's reality. It wasn't anyone's reality, except for the privileged few who have access to the resources of this country. And that was really sad. That was really sad, because not only were facts distorted, there were blatant lies about the state of the nation. And I don't think that, like the previous speakers say, I don't think it reflects what has happened in the 5 years. Because after him also talking about the parables, before he talked about the parable, he talked about the persons who passed on.
The heroes?
The persons who passed on since the last State of the Nation address. He brought in Honorable Muhammad Segrinya. Yes, he did. Honorable Kazora. Yes.
Why are they in the State of Nation address?
He was honoring them. We stand up and, pray for them. May their souls go to heaven and things like that. And he talked about all those people, and he failed to mention the state of democracy, because a lot of these people did not just die. They were murdered by the state. They were martyred by the state. They were martyred by the state. A lot of these people just like the pilgrims, suffered a great deal because they're citizens of this country, because the government failed to do its job. Even the PDM that they talk about, we know the scandals around the PDM and the government monies. We know how people were hired to come in and talk about their stories, and then they came back and said, you guys, honestly, they gave us some money to appear on TV and say these facts, but we're not actually doing well. Things are hard. Things are hard. He didn't talk about the debt. Did he talk about the debt burden actively? No. What about the domestic debt? Like the personal debts of individuals? Because the speakers also ever told us that members of parliament are afraid to get out of the house because because money lenders are waiting for them. They're waiting for them.
For parliamentarians too.
Yeah. But like the earlier conversation
they'll join this struggle. It is okay. Struggle is real.
And the income inequalities, the gap that was mentioned was frustrating for me to hear, because he said the gap is slowly closing, and for me, from what I see,
it's closing, we're going down.
From what is being reported, the gap is widening. The rich are richer, the poor are poorer. And it was disappointing, but not surprising. Not surprising at all. And also, it did not reflect the contentious issues of this nation. It did not reflect the fact that we are talking transition in 2026. It did not reflect the fact that, but there's something that was hinted, if you think about it, and it's something we're going to talk about later on. He said that aside that the country has encountered minor issues, like the security threats, and he talked about the suicide bomber in Bunyonyo on Martyrs Day, and he said the UPDF neutralized that. Okay, when you see the video, no one neutralized anything. The girl exploded. Yes, like they didn't have time to actually act. So that was also problematic for me. Can't you just say we came to the site and it had already happened? Because there's
how did you neutralize?
How did you neutralize? Nothing happened. The bomb prematurely exploded before she reached. If she had reached, probably it would be we would be crying right now as a nation, because innocent people would be dead. But what he hinted on is the negative activism of political opponents or political enemies, and he talked about the negative propaganda against government tagged as activism, which for me it showed that the government does not like criticism, and it said that will be checked fully. And
so we are going to be tagged.
Yes, we're going to be tagged. And I believe in this, he wasn't just talking about individual activists. He was also talking about the NGO sector, because they do most of the work that the government does not do. We have to give them credit, and it is in a very hostile environment. So if you're asking me about the performance, I feel like it wasn't reflected. I feel like they did not care to actually go down and understand what's exactly happening. And if they did, it didn't matter to them. All they needed was to present a clean report.
So, please go ahead. But as you're answering that, just answer this as well. So we have no accountability structure. State of the Nation address is supposed to be an accountability structure in this nation. So
at least on an annual basis, right? There's something she mentioned, and I've realized how much NRM has played a certain mind game. And I think they assume Ugandans are still at that level where we don't realize what they're doing. So there's this thing NRM always does. When they're comparing their achievements, they compare them to opposition, right? To how opposition is performing compared to how the government is performing. But then opposition doesn't have budgets.
Has no resources.
They don't have resources. They don't have public budgets to perform certain functions. But then government is always constantly assuming that their level of performance is supposed to be compared to opposition. And when she actually also mentioned the speaker, because the parliament is also supposed to give an accountability for how they perform per year. So when we saw the speaker talking about just the achievements of NRM, of which people have crossed from NUP, which people have crossed from FDC, who has crossed from... You're giving us numbers of opposition members who have left other parties to join NRM. That is not a national achievement to us. That's not what we're looking to listen to. Give us what has happened in Parliament. I would love to hear the issues that we were talking about earlier, where MPs are saying they have to borrow money to go and take care of their constituencies because government bodies have failed to do their mandate, right? That's a thing I would have loved her to give an accountability on. But if you get your role as a speaker and you make it seem like you're
running your own
a communication body for the government, for NRM, let's even first leave alone government, because government, then you're going to look at a diverse body of agencies and institutions. But yeah, she's particularly speaking for NRM, and I don't think that's the reason she's in that position, right? To speak for NRM. She's not their spokesperson, but she will come and tell you how Parliament has performed this year. Is we have been able to steal NOP members, we've been able to steal people from FDC, we've been able... Why are you telling the public that? How is that an achievement for the nation?
I think our Parliament is becoming a circus ground, and I love watching a circus.
Becoming?
It has become a circus. It is already a circus, and I wouldn't be shocked that she's doing that. I wouldn't be shocked that a whole Parliament that is supposed to even be holding the government accountable in regards to policies implementation, laws implementation, to come and tell us that we stole people from this party, that is a real circus. If I tell you some of the Ugandans, including me, don't really care for this State of Nation address, and we are busy fending for what we'll be eating for the next meal, my dear, that's the result.
It's an NRM. It was an NRM caucus meeting disguised as a State
of the Nation address.
Yes, as a State of the Nation address. And okay, my biggest pain was the state of social justice, which didn't make it. Which did,
and I think that's intentional, because we're getting into elections.
Yes.
So Museveni doesn't want to go out there and look like he's failing. Because if you ask us what have they achieved in the past 5 years, I can still tell you, even if you came and gave me achievements from when was the last election? 2021. What has been the difference between 2021 to now?
Yes.
From the COVID
it's from the
period to now. Right? Have we improved?
No.
Can you say?
But also the comparison, yes, I remember, and he's like, from the time of COVID until now, we've generally improved. The time of COVID was a crisis, and things declined. He was supposed to take the nation back to its previous state and then improve it. So that did not happen.
Yeah, but then you also talked about the fact that he's constantly comparing it to his Bush tactics and the 1986 class. You people, even Obote will come here and tell you during his government, he made achievements.
Yeah.
So you can't make it seem like for the 40 years you've been in power, your only comparison
is not, when you are
is to before you came from the bush fighting like a war criminal. Is before you
when the country was still in transition from colonialism.
Even I mean, will tell you, I built the roads that you're talking about now. You've only added a few kilometers, right? Yeah. He will tell you the same thing.
And his roads are still the ones that are operational till now.
He will tell you also made achievements, right?
Even so the colonialists will tell you, well, we're still in their buildings.
Exactly.
Definitely. Look at the courts. Have we done an improvement?
So if NRM wants us to judge us based off a 40-year performance,
it should be like the past 10 years.
It needs to be a 40-year performance, and where we can be like, this has improved so drastically that Ugandans can say this is what has happened.
The NRM's own competition is itself.
I mean, when you are talking about a solid house, when you are talking about a solid house built on solid sand, I was thinking, are they still on solid ground? Because they are shaky. They are so shaky now. They are the people that have built their house on sand.
And very soon it's collapsing with the wave.
You can't talk about good democracy in Uganda. You can't talk about a good health care. You can't talk about good education. You can't talk about a good sensible working class. You can't talk about an improvement from subsistence farming to, because even the money economy you're talking about, my grandma was selling milk in the village. Will tell you, I'm selling a liter at how much? 1,000, right? Yeah. What's the value for her money? And for milking and what? There's no value. But you're telling us, I've improved the poor people from subsistence to money economy. But then there's no value for what you're telling me. It's not there.
We are suffering.
We're running into industrialization without the real checks, without care for climate, without care for climate justice.
But which industrialization actually are we talking about?
But anyway, yeah.
Because he's now complaining that his biggest issue now is the environment. But he knows it's the same people who has agencies that are not willing to put in proper checks to make sure that even the factories you're going to build can be in compliance to what the environment is supposed to be protected from.
And on top of that, the individuals we know are the ones constructing in swamps, are the ones randomly taking over.
And who is giving those land titles and forged documents?
Anyways, that's a whole conversation.
Yeah,
it's
true.
a stressful, it's a painful conversation.
We're getting
Some
into a
of us should
passionate
please send us
moment.
that name because
They should just give us one of those deliberation rooms.
Yeah.
So, ladies, we have talked about the State of the Nation address. I would like to shift our conversation into the next big elephant in the room. We started with two, the first. So, the new NGO, the proposals to the NGO laws in this country. Contentious, debatable, saddening. Naima, this is your area. I would like you to just briefly introduce the audience to this new dynamic in the country.
So apparently there's a proposed bill to regulate the NGOs, operationalization of NGOs in this country. And to me it's not shocking, but it's surprising at the same time, because as we speak now, the civic space in which the NGOs are operating is airtight. And it's shrinking by the day. And with the proposition they are having of, for example, having the NGO council, personally I'm thinking, what is it going to do different that the NGO bureau isn't doing? You know, if you look at the NGOs now, just to establish an NGO in this country, there is a lot of bureaucracy that you have to go through.
Yes.
And then after establishing the NGO, so you're given a permit and all that, the reporting lines, the moderators of operationalization of NGOs in this country, someone might not know. As NGOs, we are supposed to file annual returns and report to the NGO Bureau, file annual returns to URSB, I think the Registrar of Documents and all that, file annual returns to the Financial Intelligence Authority, file annual returns to NITA for data protection and all that, file annual returns to, there are like 7 bodies that you're supposed to report to, you know. So the regulatory bodies that have been established for NGOs, just to check them, is sickening. You'll spend the whole year filing annual returns. And remember what the NGOs are doing in this country. They are kind of subsidizing and supporting to ensure that they serve the nations, the people of this country where the government has failed. I'm going to speak in regards to, let's say, the GBV aspect in this country, because it is really serious in relation to gender-based violence in this country. That is a mandate under the Ministry of Gender. But as I speak, we do not have an established national GBV shelter that is fully operationalized by the government in this country. All the shelters that are being operated in this country are being operated by NGOs. What does that mean? The government has failed to protect the women and girls of this country and all survivors of victims of violence, and NGOs are stepping up. But according to you, this is not enough. You still want to gag them. And remember, the government is not subsidizing in supporting these GBV shelters. These NGOs are writing proposals, are looking for partners to support, fund, operationalize, and ensure that these shelters are operating. That's just one example. And so you are proposing that there should be a central basket fund for all the NGOs, on where donors who are willing to fund NGOs should deposit the money, and then the government will decide whether this aligns with the national the national development plans or the national agenda or that. Remember, you have failed to perform. Just giving you an example of the shelter. You've failed to protect survivors and victims of let's say, GBV. So these NGOs have gone out of their way to ensure that they get partners to come and support what you have failed to do as a government. So in them bringing this, you still want to tell them, no, that money now, we think it's too much. Please, how much greedy can a government get to be able to access the little funds? And these funds that are being, by the way, given to the NGOs are not millions that they're going to spend in whichever way they can. the process the NGOs undergo to develop a concept, to develop proposals, to convince donors that the work they're doing is genuine and they're going to see results. The money comes when it's ear tagged to projects and programs that have been written in these concepts and proposals. And by the way, there is strict accountability for this money to the donors.
Yeah, extremely so.
To the 1 cent that you use, everything has to be accounted. So I think the government sits there and they're like, let's say, NGO A is getting 6 billion of money. Where is this money coming from? We need to tap on this money and get it. To them, that is what they're looking at. We need to have a say on this money and get some of this money. But this money comes ear tagged. I'll tell you, for example, we could be having 65, I'm not sure of the figures, but let's say if we have 65 GBV shelters in this country and you as a government is not putting a single cent in these shelters, and an NGO decides to look for funding for these shelters to support women that you have failed as a government, and now you're confidently seated in your office and saying they are receiving billions of money, we need to make sure that all this money is centrally blockaded and the government should control, and anyone who wants to directly fund the NGO has to get approval of the cabinet that has failed to allocate resources to support these shelters or whatever projects the organizations are doing in the communities. What audacity, what morals do you have to say that this is what we want to be done if you have failed? It's like saying, I failed to provide panties, underwear for my wife. Then your wife's brother is like, you know what, you're my sister, I'm going to give you what you need for your basic needs as a woman. And the husband is like, no, that money has to come through me so that I can give it to... My dear, this government needs to wake up and do something about it. It is really disheartening to see that amidst the efforts that the NGOs have done to ensure that the people who are living in poverty or the citizens that are not getting the services as required are getting it. And then as a government, you want to stomp your foot and ensure that you distort and disorganize everything that the citizens are obtaining from NGOs by you wanting to further gag the NGOs is really disheartening and disappointing. And I don't know where this country is going, because at the end of it all, it is the Montua Wansi who's going to suffer. The people seated in the governments, in their offices, do not care. They really don't care about the citizens of this country. All they care about is how to get that money that the citizens of this country are getting through initiatives run by the NGOs. So to me, it is sad. And I don't know where this bill is going and the proposal is going. But let's see, in this country, nothing surprises me anymore.
Okay. Do you think, say, for instance, say this national basket is established, donor funding as we see it now would remain or would be unaffected? Because I think there is a mentality that the same amount of money that NGOs have been receiving will not be affected by this new policy, or it will be affected in such a minute manner. But national policies have historically affected how funding is received and distributed in this country. So,
sorry. I'm sorry for laughing, because as you're speaking, I'm like, who trusts this government?
No,
to say that
very far.
These NGOs are not going to, like...
You're going very far. Was it fighting with our investors just the other day?
We're told we don't need
the same funders that we're actually talking about.
But one thing but also this law, let me come in quick. This law also says that they will determine who will contribute to this basket. That means that they have already ticked out certain donors. It means that we already, like, so just at the back of our minds, we should just understand that there are some donors we have already lost some billions of monies.
So the pre-approved ones, do they want us? Will they want us?
Now, let me tell you one thing, Danita, that people need to understand. With the NGO world now, the donors are re-evaluating their interests on what they're going to fund. Initially it was, you know, women, peace and security, women's rights and all that. And now the new trend is climate justice. Do you understand that? So most donors are tweaking to ensure that, because a donor, if I'm going to give you money, I decide what I'm going to invest in for you, you know. So what I change to is what you need to align your work and, you know, your missions and visions as an organization to, for you to be able to access the funding. A very good example is the USAID issue that happened. You know how many NGOs were affected just with that executive order from President Trump, and how many funding was stopped, and they were like, this is not aligning with our national, policies, and they can afford to do that because they are giving us the money. But you as a government that is failing to even give the, okay, I'm not going to go very far. Let's look at the bailer on HIV and all that. Let's look at health in this country. Let's look at the people, the women and the people in Gulu area or the north of Uganda that suffered the civil war and haven't been getting the services they require as citizens of this country. And the government has totally failed to provide them with these services. And NGOs step up and like, you know what, we're going to get for donors who align with women, peace and security and their rights, and get funding to support these women on their health initiatives. And now you're going to look at these people as people who are going against, or people you've already, scraped off your book, and then you want to restrict this money. You as a government, you failed to do it. Someone is coming to help you, and then you at the same time wanting to give them more, telling them, you know what, bring that money in my pocket first, then I will see who deserves. Because I'm very sure there are some NGOs that have been highlighted already that are going to be denied access of these funds so that they can close. And I'm very sure these are NGOs that have been on the government's case in regards to democracy in this country, in regards to the state of human rights in this country, in regards to their governance and policies of this country. Definitely those are the NGOs that are going to be affected. They want to see NGOs that align to their doctrines. I don't know what they are, because NGOs are supposed to hold government accountable. So if you want to gag the people that are holding you accountable, what is it that you want to do that you don't want to be held accountable on? So I think these policies are coming, the proposed policies on establishing a national. Honestly, I need someone to just tell me what the National NGO Council is going to do that the Bureau is not doing. Honestly. Unless it's a regurgitating of, duplicating of what is already being done.
And didn't they rationalize that?
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. Is it the right time for government to start rationalizing bodies now? They failed to do their core mandate already, but they are now trying to put more work into their agencies to take on a much bigger load that they know they could have left to say the NGO Bureau to do, and it's performing its function, but now they're pulling it back to Ministry of what? Of Internal Affairs.
The NGO Bureau has really done tremendous work in regulating NGOs in this country. So I don't know who is advising the president or who is bringing this proposal and what their intention is.
I think it's control.
And I think because we're going towards the elections, perhaps they're looking at NGOs that work on issues to do with governance and accountability for the government. People who have been putting a spotlight on the government and the atrocities they've been doing during the elections. I wouldn't be shocked. That could be what is driving them in suggesting these new policies and laws. But yeah, this is, like I said, I'm no longer surprised by what this government does.
In my opinion, I think it's the prioritization of less controversial issues. Because if you've listened to the trend of events these days, the government is holding a Christian family conference or Christian youth to the church, and hey, everyone has a right to practice their faith.
Like the Constitution.
There's something you talked about when you said a donor is going to be willing to fund, and I wanted to say something around there, because I think most times we assume that donors are also pro-people. A constant assumption is that donors are working for people as well. But I can assure you, the minute government puts its foot down and says, funders, I'm not willing to let you work with civil society like this anymore, they are going to run very far. And you can see it's already happening. The trend you're talking about. They are aligning themselves with government slowly by slowly, pulling out of all the contentious issues, and now only willing to fund the things they assume are safe. So they also want to work with the government.
But the funders who also want I'll give you an example of DGF. When DGF was told to walk away or do this or walk away, they walked away. There are some funders who are really pro-people and they're philanthropists and they are working for people. So, yeah, in as much as some might want to align with the government, there are those whose principles are to work for the people and provide for the people. So, I think there is two-way, there's a fair balance, but we hope this is not going, the decision to, the proposals of the new laws, the NGO, to regulate the NGOs will not affect the people, because most of the NGOs work for the people, and just to ensure that it's kind of subsidizing what the government has failed to do. So them doing this and controlling which funders are doing what, I hope it will not affect the people. As a people person, to me, my pain goes to the people, especially people living in poverty who are not able to access these, and the funders have been helping them to, kind of receive the basic needs that they need where the government has failed. Hopefully it will not affect them, and hopefully the poverty rate will not shoot with this darkness.
As I was saying, prioritization of less controversial issues, but they're also closing avenues for accountability or criticism, whether constructive or because NGOs have done good work on that. And you find that during elections they have their people arrested. They have their people arrested as they're observing the state of democracy. They have their offices closed and raided.
Banks frozen.
Their bank accounts frozen. And all those things. But also, this might sound controversial or a bit radical, but in my opinion, looking at it from a political perspective, I think they're trying to close all avenues for alternative advocacy for policy, but also slowly shifting back into the single party system in this country. They do not want the existence of other bodies except the NRM. That is what I think.
Before you put a nail in it, I'm going to go back a little to something you mentioned, and it's an emerging trend, right? Where I had mentioned that are you sure even donors are willing to? And I've seen a growing trend when the conservative agenda started pushing. A lot of funders were even literally funding the most contentious issues were willing to cut a bit back and say, you know what? We are willing to work like this. If we can fund it maybe a certain way, we're willing to do that.
I think the World Bank just reinstated the funding after the gay thing, the LGBTQ scenario.
The agenda started some time back. It's just that now slowly it has taken root and it's becoming very visible. But most of us who have been mapping the trends have been seeing that opposition for a long time. And now that conservative agenda is not just pushing in certain aspects. People think, for example, when conservatives are pushing back against health, where they are pushing back against safe abortion, when they are pushing back against concepts of family planning, they assume it stops there. They don't realize it can also easily infiltrate into democracy as well and governance. They don't realize it's a general cycle of how donors work also. Because outside governance, what else are you doing that actually covers other aspects of sectors as well? Your governance is attached to health, it's attached to education, it's attached to agriculture, it's attached to... That's why when you saw people like, when you saw ministries like Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Netherlands, that has been funding so many diverse programs across Africa and across the globe, the minute the conservative agenda became so strong, they also pulled back their funding. It went back from about 74% to 30-something, because they're also not willing to face the backlash, right? So the agenda is not just contributing to certain aspects, it's entering governance as well. So people assume government is detached because they're against certain things like LGBTIQ, etc. But they don't realize that they're also pinpointing to what she has talked about. They're also putting certain party systems into place that also still attribute to certain conservative agendas as well. A multi-party system in Uganda, how problematic is it for NRM to constantly fight with other parties? They are fighting with civil society, which by the under the law is provided for. Right? We have a constitution providing for people's right to civic engagement. We have the local government council that says NGOs are doing subsidiary work in terms of service provision. But even government's, what's that plan, the poverty plan for what? For eradication, right? It also has specific tasks for civil society to work. But now you're seeing government saying, there's an area where you're not being compliant with us, so we are willing to remove all these functions you're doing. and put you back under control in terms of how we want you to work.
But also, who has access to this funding? Who is going to run the NGOs after the fund is put in that national basket? You need to think about that, because right now we are complaining about the income inequality gap. Not only is unemployment going to have become a problem, but I believe that issues of sectarianism are going to be heightened. The income inequality is going to increase. Lots of people will lose their jobs. But also, it's going to force us back into some of the biggest questions that this country had, constitutional questions that this country had from the very beginning. The issue of sectarianism, and people look at this as a simple thing, but right now people are dressing up the NRM as a concept of Western Uganda and giving it an ethnic identity. You see it in the way those government officials dress. You know, on Matters Day, the Prime Minister and the Vice President, yes, they were all dressed, and they were yellow. The point is not that. Of course, we're free to interact with people's cultures, and it is nice to experiment on that. But the thing is, the message that it sends. I saw Winnie Byanima's tweet on that, and it really poked my consciousness, because I'd been trying to actually find a way to put it into conversation, but I couldn't find the right words. It's the message that it sends. It's the message that those people are loyal to a certain person of a certain tribe, and therefore they are dressing that way. And you find that they're innocent Ugandans from that same ethnicity that have no idea what this agenda is. They don't even subscribe to it. But now, in the future, just like we know how problematic things of sectarianism,
indoctrination as well.
Yes, indoctrination. How it's gonna be? It's going to affect us in the. I think, in order for us to undo the type of propaganda, the type of narratives and socialization the NRM has weaved into the fabric of this country, we're going to need another 40 years. After them.
Okay. When you speak of that, I think we also haven't considered the tax base, because I think people underestimate the amount of money that is taxed, that NGOs present. If there is a donor cut, there's donor funding. Someone was mentioning to me, you see these random fines, everything that, or the way taxes are increasing in this country, there's a gap that has been created just because donor funding has been cut in this country. And so people are trying to now figure out a way of weaving in more sources. So if it is further cut, taxes will increase in so many areas simply because a certain threshold is being met. So I think we really underestimated the
contribution of NGO
exactly,
and the donors.
And that brings me to my next and final question for the day. I think the public is largely unaware of what is happening. Like I genuinely think that the public is largely unaware of what is happening in regards to not just the new laws, but also the contribution NGOs play in our society. I think it has been downplayed quite a great deal. And it has also been, there is a certain narrative, a certain negative progressive narrative that has been attached to NGOs. If you want to speak down to an NGO, you just attach a certain tagline to it, and suddenly people are like, oh yes, those
paid
guys.
activism.
Exactly. Those people there from that group, they're funded by so many narratives surround it. And so when a lot of people, first of all, have not heard that there are so many contentious laws that are being proposed, but then when they hear about it, they simply do not care, because they don't appreciate what exactly the service delivery they are being able to access simply because one NGO exists. Even this conversation right now, being able to be educated by this conversation
is through an NGO.
So when my next question is in regards to the public opinion. How do we shift public opinion to appreciate NGOs, but then also to appreciate the state of the new legal state, which might be around the corner? It's like that's, and I would propose. I just table it to all of you. You want all of us to start talking? Please, you can do one by one, and if you are so willing, you would also give us your closing remarks as you.
Well, in my opinion, I think before anything else, and I'm speaking to especially NGOs that work around women and young people, and I'm telling you, fact is that what we need to invest in is narrative change. People, conservatives, invested in destroying the work of women's rights activists, the work of NGOs that have been done in order to bring us to, you know, the benefits that we got from all the activism and the work of NGOs. They've done a lot of work into undoing that. They are still doing it. They are willing to pay for it. And they are very serious about it. And usually people take this thing lightly and they're like, oh, anyone with common sense would understand. No,
Common sense ain't common.
Common sense is not common. And this even comes down to our issues of democracy, because you come to Civic Space TV and people will be like, oh, you're on Civic Space TV. Oh, but, you know, me, I don't care about those things of elections. I just stay home. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't care about elections? I feel like lack of awareness is also a crime. Because everyone is responsible for the type of country we're supposed to live in. And if you're there taking a chill pill while everyone else is doing the hard work, that is not right. But we cannot go lightly on this. It means we have to invest in narrative change. People must be paid to do the narrative change. I don't care if they call it paid activism. They are also paying for their narratives. They are paying good coin for it. You hear people from the conservative West saying, we're going to Africa to teach Christianity. We're the most, yeah. We're the most Christian. we are the most religious people in the world. We're like the most religious people in the world. They pay good money for that to happen. They send good people. They invest in those people's education in order to do the type of work that they're doing. And this agenda is funded by people who want to take us back to like 80 years or 100 years back to when we could not speak. And every time I give an example of how badly a nation can fare, in the 70s, there was a post by someone on X, and they said Afghanistan in the 70s, and it showed some women liberally dressed, but also taking up space, speaking on microphones. That was Afghanistan in the 70s. Afghanistan today, women's voices cannot be heard. They're not allowed to talk. You can't see to be seen. They cannot. So every time someone says, also those feminists, I would like people to understand that that's where we're going. Or that is the genuine agenda. Well, so that you guys can contribute.
Okay, closing remarks as well.
Oh, my closing remarks is, you know, I urge everyone to take interest in everything that is happening in the nation, but not just to take interest, but to understand how this affects you individually. If you're waiting for other people to make the change for you, well, the rain is going to pull off the roof on your house and no one will be there because everyone is dealing with their own
First they
things.
came for who? The feminists.
Yeah,
Now they came for you.
They cannot fight for you anymore.
Yes. But this is also something that I always say on the show. We exist by accord that we must do as little harm as possible to each other. So even the agendas that you jump on to support, you need to be conscious about what they're propagating. Don't think that everyone is out there for your self-interest. The ultimate standard for a good life is for everyone to have freedom, even if you do not like them.
Amazing.
Yes.
Well, I think for me, just to say, in regards to people understanding the role the NGOs play, I'm going to give an example of where my organization works, that is the eastern and the northern part of this country. And why we focus on those parts of the country, it's because those are the highly poverty-stricken parts of this country. And personally, being born and bred in a city, in an urban area, I did not understand what that meant. So in my organization, there's something called immersion. So immersion is you go and you're immersed in the community that we operate and you live the life of the people. I was taken to a family that survives on 2,000 shillings a day. And I had to live like them, stay in a hut without a mattress, sleep on a mat, and cover myself with lasso for days. And for me, it was just an experiment for days. To understand what the NGOs contribute to this country, you need to walk in the shoes of the people the NGOs are holding hands. Unless you go to the communities and understand what NGOs really do, you will never appreciate and acknowledge the work they do. I was immersed in the community. I understood how people live in this country who are living in poverty. And trust me, if I see someone coming and saying, these NGOs are just eating money, there is no money people are eating. Yeah. Like I said, projects and proposals given to funders are ear-tagged with the prices. Implementing, for example, we do agroecology, teach agroecology in the communities in the east and northern of Uganda, how to ensure that you sustain agriculture amidst the climate changes in the country right now. Planting plants that are resistant to the climate changes. The government is not doing this. To even shock you, the government is earmarking what the NGOs are doing to make it a national policy. That is how important the NGOs are in this country. Because the government does not have the expertise and the resources to do this research on ground, to get to know that this is what is affecting the people and this is actually what needs to be done. The NGOs are there to ensure that what they are providing for the people is what the people really need. It's not a matter of sitting on your desk and doing research and saying, I think people, but being on the ground, working in the shoes of the people and understanding what their needs are and providing that. So that's what NGOs are doing. So for those out there thinking NGOs are not doing anything important, they are doing much more important work than the government is doing. And we're not even getting enough credit for this. So for me, it's for people to understand that, by the way, without these NGOs, we are going to suffer as a country. Yeah. We are going to suffer. But we need to also be alert. Like the Constitution says, ignorance of the law is not defense. Likewise, ignorance of what is going on in this country should not make you live in a bubble and think that you're doing very, very well. There are people in this country who are the majority. 70% of people in this country are living in poverty, and they are being helped by NGOs. So we need to find a way of us being a communal country and understanding what our needs are as a community. And this, I'm speaking to even our members of parliament, who after getting the elections, you just go and sit in the parliament and drive posh cars without understanding the needs of your constituents, and then you just go back to ask for votes, giving people sugar. That doesn't make sense. That's not what the needs of the community are. So instead of gagging the NGOs and the civic space, we need to see how we can supplement and support them so that they continue the work they are doing. And for me, to the government and the policymakers, is you need to really think what you're doing, whether it is benefiting the people of this country or just benefiting yourselves and God knows who else you're serving. But this world, and next year is coming. We are going to vote. So, citizens of this country, please, let us look at who is, interrupting your services as a citizen and who is supporting the community. Just don't vote based on sugar and salt and soap. Let's be accountable. Let's hold the people accountable and make sure we're voting the people who will be accountable to this community. Those are my parting shots.
Thank you so much, Naima. This was very comprehensive and also heartening.
It is.
Yes.
It breaks my heart.
Yeah.
Well, I will just pick on right from there. A gentleman we know, and I think most of us know this quote, Yvonne Mpambara once said that if we do not develop a nervous system where we can all feel each other's pain, we're going to continue this cycle of nothingness until this country has nothing left indeed, right? So when I'm hearing most of the conversations I even hear now where people are saying, oh, we've given up on voting, we don't want to vote anymore. They are planning to boycott the coming election and saying that, it no longer makes sense for them to contribute to a system that is continuously doing this. But then I think we forget most times that democracy is not an NRM-produced thing, right? Africans have always been Democrats. They've always been democratic. We've always had a certain way of systems, having these structures of certain rule and certain control, simply because we have that system of working together to make sure that, each and every group of Ugandan is actually catered to. So I feel it's not the time to give up. There are so many people who don't have the privilege of giving up. They don't have the privilege of waking up and saying, I can't vote. Because they know their worth is attached to that one vote. They're going to give to maybe Bobby Wine, who they see change in, that they're going to see given maybe Yvonne Mpambara, who they see worth in to break barriers towards women leading. They see that confidence, right? So I feel as a country, we can't afford, especially if we're going down the tunnel we're going to, we cannot afford to give up and say, we're leaving it to whoever wants to continue doing what they're doing. We cannot afford to give NRM the kind of country we want to give it to. We have to fight. We have to overwhelm them. We have to, no matter how long it takes us with that fight, we have to do it. And it's not up to us to leave it to the poor people because we feel they're the ones who don't understand how voting works, or the people in the rural areas because they're the continuously, consistently, most people that show up to vote, right? Because they know what their vote means. So I don't want to get emotional with it, but I feel Ugandans need to understand what the importance of solidarity and the importance of numbers means to actually showing up for good democracy, for governance. It is up to us. If you had asked me all these questions previously, I would have told you the one solution we need for this country is to change the entire structure and remove it.
Definitely.
We can just leave it and come back.
Remove everything completely the way it is and start all over again. Right? We come with new solutions to see what we can do as a country to make sure that we go back to the general principles of good democracy, good governance. Right? The good thing that is now on our side is the bad governance is also taking people that are part of that privileged structure. So the little bit of joy people get is from saying, you know what, we've made so much noise about what is going wrong with this country. The only thing for us now is seeing some of you suffer as well, right? So my message to Ugandans is we can't afford to give up now. We must utilize whatever thing we have to do to make sure that we continue pushing for this country to move in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you so much, ladies. This conversation has been extremely enlightening. I feel more educated. I feel more heartbroken. And definitely more moved to serve my nation, Ask not what your nation can do for you, but what you can do for your nation. And I think that the most that I and the rest of the viewers can do today is educate ourselves first and foremost. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of yet another Tuesday afternoon. This conversation has been, like I said, engaging, but it has also been disheartening. But it has also pinpointed the fact that we as citizens owe a duty to ourselves and to our nations and to each other to educate ourselves, to be aware of what is happening to us, amongst us, and to others as well. What happens to your neighbor, it is not an isolated incident. It will reach, it's the national shege. The cake will reach us all. But let us first and foremost spend our time, be deliberate about educating ourselves. We owe it as citizens, and we can only hope. And for those of us that pray for the very, very best in this country. It has been lovely having you. I look forward to having you again next week. Have a good day. My name is Turiho Danita, your host.